All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Holder. I am a scientist at the State Water Board and the co-chair of the Safety Work Group. And I'm here with my co-chair, Jay Davis. I'm going to be driving a lot today, so bear with me, but there will be about an hour for us to discuss together. So brace yourselves for contributing. But first, before we get started, I like to start all of our meetings with acknowledging and expressing my gratitude for tribal lands in California. The Cali PA building and the hub of this work group is located in a place that we now call Sacramento, California, which was and still is a gathering place for many local tribes who have lived throughout the Central Valley and foothills since time immemorial, and are the original stewards of these lands and waters. These people include the Nishinan, Maidu, and Miwok peoples, and the Putwin and Wintun nations, who have remained committed to the stewardship of these lands and waters over many centuries. I think about these peoples every time I'm out in the garden, like really connecting with the land. And it's important for us to recognize that our organization sits on the tribal lands of Indigenous peoples and that we're here because of the sacrifices that have been forced upon them. And in acknowledging and remembering these communities and all of the work we do, today we're talking about priorities for our future. We want to center these communities in our thoughts and hopefully honor their legacies, their lives, and their descendants. So with that, we'll start with a roll call. And there's not a ton of us, so feel free to unmute, turn your camera on, say hi. And we'll start with the peer review panel.
Wait, I have to find my camera. Start video. There we go. Hi, I'm Chris Schmidt. I am one of the reviewers. I'm a volunteer / scientist emeritus with USGS and a research associate with Lincoln University of Missouri at the present time.
Thanks for joining, Chris. Okay. EPA. Great. OEHA.
Hey, Anna, Wes Smith with OEHA.
Hey, Wes.
Hi, good morning. Lauren Chumney here, also with OEHA.
Hey, Lauren, welcome.
Good morning.
And Sharon Fan from OEHA.
Okay, do y'all practice that? Because that was like the smoothest introductions with more than one person. OEHA's killing it this morning. Good job. Moss Landing.
Hi, I'm Autumn Bonema.
And everyone else is probably in the field. Okay, regional board, region 1.
Rich Fadness, region 1.
Hey, Rich. Region 2.
Gerardo Martinez, region 2.
Good morning, Gerardo. Welcome.
Good morning.
Region 3. Four. 5. 6.
Hi, Kelly. Not smooth.
Okay.
Lori Screeve also on the line.
Welcome. Awesome. Region 7. Region 8.
Heather.
Hey, Heather. Region 9. Okay, great. State board folks. Anyone? There's only a couple of us.
Tessa Fojit from Swamp.
Hey, Tessa.
Chad Fearing from Contract Management.
Hey, Chad, welcome. Okay. The Monitoring Council. I don't see Nick or Peter, so we might just keep going. And anyone from a California Native American tribe? Okay, great. Did I miss anyone?
Yeah, just saw Zwen joined.
Oh, right. Hey, Swen, we just did roll call. Welcome.
Hello, present. Sorry for being tardy.
No, you're right on time.
And there was a woman named Jessica Cleaver who was on, but then got off apparently.
That's
Do
all right.
you know who that is?
Nope.
Okay.
She's probably like, but we're best friends. All right. So today I'm gonna give an overview of what we've been doing. I made a timeline that you'll see in a few minutes, and we've been thinking about this long-term monitoring priorities process since January of 2023, which I forgot. That's how long we've been thinking about it. So I'm gonna walk through what we've been doing since then and give an update on where we are now. And then I'm gonna walk you through a spreadsheet that I've been using to synthesize all of the feedback that we've received over the past year, mostly over the past like 6 months, and then open it up for discussion and highlighting any priorities or underscoring anything that you really want me to bring to swamp management as we talk about the priorities that we're going to set for the next 5 years or so. And then we'll wrap and get on with our day. So if the discussion doesn't take 60 minutes, then we'll end early. If it does, awesome. It's totally up to you all. So diving in. Y'all have been part of this since the beginning, but for the folks that maybe need a refresher or are listening on the recording, we started this long-term monitoring priorities assessment process to really hear from the bioaccumulation monitoring community or folks interested in that topic about what your priorities are over the coming years and how we can support that. So we've been spending this time on, listening to all of those recommendations, and we're getting to the point where we're thinking about how do we most effectively use our swamp funds to achieve those goals. Okay, so shortly, we're going to make a long-term monitoring plan that will help us kind of plan out the next 5 years or so. Through this process, I really wanted to get an idea of what that plan should look like. We're in this moment in our planning and contracts where we've kind of done all of the monitoring that we set out to do 10 or 15 years ago, and we have an opportunity to pivot. So we're doing that now, but using all of the feedback that we've received to inform those movements. So we're gonna make a long-term monitoring plan for the next, like I said, 5 years or so. Again, that decision will be up to the swamp management. And then we're gonna start developing our more specific plans for 2025 and hopefully 2026. So this is the timeline that I was talking about. I was looking back through all of our STU notes, and I proposed this process and shared the templates that many of you use to share your feedback at our January 2023 meeting. We gave reminders during our quarterly STU meetings that year, but really, dove in earnest in October and November when folks were starting to complete their templates and prepare for presentations that happened December 2023, January, February 2024 from the water boards. In February and March, we had presentations from other California state agencies and other monitoring partners. Folks also, mostly from tribes and community-based organizations, completed the priority survey that we shared. We got some responses there. Today, we're in March, at the end of March, and we're having the synthesis discussion, which is in blue. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be sharing all of these things with swamp management, including, really firm recommendations based on the feedback that we've received and the spreadsheet that you'll see in a moment. They're going to take all of that information and kind of help us set the priorities for the next couple of years. And then I'll report back on that in our April meeting, and then work with Jay to kind of develop this long-term plan. And we'll share that when it's drafted for folks to review asynchronously, but we'll share the final version of that at our October meeting. So then we will be wrapped. Took us 2 years, but we got there on time, hopefully early. So as I mentioned, we had presentations from the regional boards and the state board's Division of Water Quality that does our integrated report and assessment. We heard from Biomonitoring California and OEHA, as well as the San Francisco Bay Regional Monitoring Program, or Bay RMP, the BITE RMP, and we got updates from folks from the Delta RMP as well. Folks did take the survey that maybe didn't have capacity or interest in presenting, but they did share really valuable feedback, mostly from California Native American tribes that are listed on the slide. And we also had Cal Fish and Wildlife submitted, someone from Cal Fish and Wildlife completed the survey, and from a community-based organization, APA Family Support Services. So I'm going to, in a moment, review the synthesis of how I combined all of that awesome feedback, and then we'll move to discussion. I kind of went over this, but this kind of shows things in the frame of the timeline if you're more of a visual person. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be working with management to kind of explain the process and synthesis and priorities, and anything that y'all want to really underscore today, I'm going to bring that to my swamp management. I'll present everything on April 24th. Jay and I are going to work on the monitoring plan, and then the final plan will be presented in October. I think it's October 30th. Hey, I was right. So here's the next safety workgroup meetings. July is just going to be a regular old meeting. We're going to talk about monitoring that's happening and kind of get ourselves back to normal. Same with April 24th. That will mostly be a regular meeting with a small presentation of priorities. And you'll notice that the April 17th meeting has been canceled. It was really to recap the process, but we're doing that now. And all of us already have too many meetings. So I'm not going to waste your time. So we'll just meet on April 24 and go from there. And now we're at the point where we're back to our regular quarterly schedule. So if you haven't registered for any meetings, you can click one of these registration links and register for all 3 meetings. Any questions about that before I move to synthesis? Okay, great. So I am going to share my screen and walk you through the summary sheet that I developed. And let me make it, how's the text on that? Is that okay, or should it be bigger?
It's
okay.
readable.
It's all right.
Is anybody not able to read it? Okay.
Okay, well, we can go through things slowly.
Yeah.
So across the top, just to orient folks, every column is representative of someone who gave us feedback in one way or another. So we've got the water boards, California Native American tribes, so folks that gave us feedback through that survey, California state agencies, OEHA, Biomonitoring California, and Cal Fish and Wildlife Fisheries. Other bioaccumulation monitoring programs, the BITE, the Bay, and the Delta RMP. And then other folks that we've heard from, either from the forum, or we also had a conversation from folks that concerned about Lake Arrowhead. This last column is for me to take notes if we want to highlight anything about any of the topics in any of the rows. But on the far left, I know scrolling's the worst, apologies. I have percentages of folks that said yes to the things. So in the rows, we've got basically the types of conversations that we had were grouped based on water body types. So we have lakes and reservoirs, coastal areas, rivers and streams. And then if folks provided like general comments about any of the things, one that came up a lot was, we want to fill data gaps with the integrated report. That was noted here. So I could like have that as a reference. General species, fish, shellfish, other, again with those comments. And the reason why it's structured this way is because that's also the structure of the survey. So I wanted to be able to do a one-to-one comparison there. The contaminant classes. So we've got those percentages highlighted on when people say yes, please to this. Oh, the other thing I'll note is if you're a representative from any of these places and you see something that should be updated, we could do that now as well. I'm not going to be sharing this link publicly just because it doesn't need to be, but or if you're hearing something and say, actually, I'm from XYZ, and after hearing all of this, I want to say yes to this thing or no to that thing, we can make those edits here.
Anna, could you share a PDF of it if people want to be able to look at it offline?
Yes. Yes, but I'll have to figure out how to make it look nice.
Yeah, sure.
So, but folks, we also asked for people to give us very specific recommendations. I'm interested in this water body or this species. And so we captured those kind of here. So we started with water body types. So you can see, for example, for Division of Water Quality, their recommendation was to fill gaps on their category 3 list. So I looked at that list and added water bodies that were listed. The same goes for OEHA in their spreadsheet. They are in their template. They shared recommendations, but then also a list of public inquiries that they received with requests from OEHA. So I added those here. And if we go down, there's coastal areas, rivers and streams, and then the same for species. So if folks listed certain species, I captured that here. Biomonitoring California shared reports of caught fish in their ACE-1 and ACE-2 surveys. And so I captured those, just like some of the tribes requested certain things. So same for fish, shellfish, and anything else that didn't fall in those categories. And then just for the regional boards, I asked for sticking points. I wanted to capture all of the things that we kind of all talk about during these meetings, but I wanted to quantify them in some way so that our management can see the areas in which we need the most support. I don't think anyone will be surprised at the results. Everyone agreed that we have a lack of funding, and many of us said something about needing information on consumption patterns. So when a consumption survey or something, anything. And that's it. So that's just kind of the orientation. And we can kind of go through the summaries really quickly for the percentages. And I don't think it's maybe worth our time to like look at everyone's responses one by one. But if folks want to revisit something, we can totally do that. So I was actually surprised by the water body types. I was expecting lakes and reservoirs and coastal areas to be like everyone's favorite thing. And it was kind of a mix. And so lakes and reservoirs and rivers and streams were noted as important or in a priority for 64% of folks that gave us information. And coastal areas is only about 50%. For species, I think I said a couple of times during this process, I'm not assuming that fish are not going to be important, but if everyone says no more fish, just shellfish, just bird eggs, whatever, then I wanted to know that. And I wasn't surprised at these results. Fish are still really important to most folks, but shellfish are also important to many. So that's something to acknowledge and note. And then there's more than that in terms of what people consume. And so many folks indicated, mostly tribes, I think, things other than fish and shellfish that were important. For the contaminant classes, basically we gave a list of things that we've monitored or in the past or are considering now, with space for folks to say other things. And to no surprise, metals came up as really important. PFAS also, I think, is the #2 answer. That's really hot topic right now. So not surprised at all to see that. But then another thing that kind of popped up is really understanding the integration of how algal toxins impact the safety of fish and shellfish for things that people consume. And so that's something that we might want to spend a little bit more time on exploring with our harmful algal bloom team. Not necessarily to start monitoring, because we don't really have the capacity for that right now, but maybe thinking about long-term, making a plan for how do we address that collectively as a community. I will say too, for the metals, one comment that came up in conversation and in the templates as I read them was acknowledging that we have a lot of great mercury data specifically throughout the state. And so it's not always about collecting or doing those analyses when we've done that recently at a water body. But if it's been a while, or we haven't, sampled that water body before, or the integrated report or OEHA need a couple of more samples to really do their analyses, that's, I think, the priority when it comes to mercury. That's what I gathered from the templates and the discussions we've had. And then we're down to the specifics. And I'll just scroll down to the sticking points so folks can kind of see them or take a screenshot on the recording or whatever. So as I mentioned, lack of funding and understanding consumption patterns are real sticking points for most of us. But close after that is staff and subject matter expertise. And so for me, this means, to the extent that we can, we want to increase our staff internally, but also really strengthen our partnerships so that we can leverage the expertise of our partners to kind of fill that gap in the meantime. Okay, I've talked a lot. What do y'all think? What's coming up? Yeah, Autumn.
Hey, so you mentioned with the water body type that coast didn't come up as high as you thought it would. Is that an artifact of not everybody has a coast in their general area? So can you skew that percentage for maybe only include those folks who have access to the coast directly? And I'm not talking about just the regions. I don't know, some of these other groups.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an artifact. We've got a pretty large state and not all of it is coastal. So it makes sense that not everyone prioritizes the coast. Yeah. Jay.
Just an overarching thought that I'll throw out now. There's a lot of needs, and we've had a pretty lean and focused program due to the limited budget. Everybody understands that the funding is a critical factor, but there's a lot of things that we haven't been doing that we could do, or things we could do more of. So we need to, it's going to be tough to decide what fits into the budget. I'm just thinking that, there's a possibility that the budget will increase. So as we write up a plan, maybe we should like write it for different funding levels, the funding level expected based on what we know now, but if we add, more money, what would be the next tier of priority things to bring in? I don't know if anybody goes back this far, but in the early days of Swamp, Val Connor asked me to draft a design for statewide bioaccumulation monitoring, and I did it at 3 different funding levels, from a bare bones to a Cadillac kind of thing. So maybe we do something like that again.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think we've just from the program's perspective, I like to have projects at the ready so that when a grant comes along or we have a fellow or something surprising happens, we're able to really jump on those opportunities. For example, we received a 205J grant to develop an app to that would be culturally informed to help folks understand which fish are safer to eat in water bodies near them. And we're going to be starting that with partners like OEHA and the California Environmental Indian Alliance and other things. So if we didn't have those projects at the ready, we wouldn't be able to jump on that opportunity. And I think consumption surveys are on that list for me. I know we heard presentations from many regional boards that are doing their own work in this. And so I think at some point very soon, we should kind of come back together and share what we're learning and maybe make a plan as a team on how we want to fill that need. Again, it might be a longer term plan pending funding and resources, but I think it'd be worth us thinking about what that plan looks like so that we can get it addressed as soon as possible.
Sounds good.
Anyone else have thoughts, or if you're from one of these groups and want me to scroll over to what your responses look like, happy to do that.
Anna, this is Heather. Yeah, I think I put fish consumption survey, but when you were really scrolling fast, I didn't see that, but no worries if you can add it, because we definitely have that need.
Let's check. Haha, 8, right?
Yep.
All right, 100%.
Thanks.
Perfect. Anyone else have want to review anything or say, actually, given all of this, that everything is right? If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. So if we want to adjust our responses, we can do that here. Yeah, Chad, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm late.
No worries, welcome.
Okay, now I can't see me. Weird.
There you are.
There we go. Okay, I was just curious what the other species were. You said some tribes and other groups had identified other non-shellfish or fish species.
Yeah, so we've got some phyto and zooplankton, bird eggs, lamprey, native plants, and seaweed, kelp. And then I think someone somewhere wrote like everything everywhere all the time, which I didn't necessarily include that because I think that's all what's in our hearts, but not super helpful when making decisions. So yeah, that's what came up.
Did you include crustaceans in with shellfish, or is that its own category?
Yes.
Okay.
Because shellfish were what we've kind of been expecting. Crayfish, mussels, lobster, oyster, crab, and then more specifics.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, if I assume the Region 2 request was for phytoplankton is for food web dynamic work.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Nobody's out there with the plankton that consuming plankton after they collect it.
We actually did do
Region 2 is here, so if they want to expand on that.
back when Carrie Austin was had Gerardo's position, she had us do some plankton tows in San Pablo. So we have a little bit of that they started for that effort.
Yeah, we have some data too for San Diego Bay for PCBs.
Right, I forgot we did that for you.
Yeah.
So for just out of transparency, where my head's at is, what should we recommend to our management? For me, I heard loud and clear that filling gaps for OEHA and the integrated report was really important for not just the water boards, but tribes and communities want to understand how to consume fish and shellfish and other things, as we've seen, according to their cultural practices in a way that's safe. And filling those gaps would help achieve that. It would get us closer. So again, throwing something out there, let me know, how it lands for you. How do people feel about maybe for 2025, prioritizing water bodies that are listed by OEHA as they're like, we need data from these places, and the integrated report that are on the category 3 list? Maybe it's like just lakes right now. Let's just say, let's fill gaps in lakes. Because I don't know, I mean, our budget's not going to go very far, but if we make a plan for that and start to chip away with very focused for the first couple of years, and then maybe have a longer term, like regular monitoring plan, what does that bring up for folks? How do people feel about that? And I'm not assuming silence is consent here, so I actually need you to say something.
I have a question. Oh, let Heather go first.
Yeah, Heather.
Oh, I was just going to say, for planning purposes, it's kind of nice to know, when we had that sheet that said this lake was sampled, and then in 10 years time, it'll be sampled. So whatever time frame it is, it's kind of nice to know, when it will be sampled again, or that type of thing, just for planning purposes, and then maybe to coordinate with other groups. I think one of the things that I've always had an issue with is trying to match up the cycles of, trying to fund bite projects with, coordinating with this group. And, it's problematic. And we have a lot of 303D listings for like Anaheim Bay, Huntington Harbor, those kind of places, and they haven't been revisited in forever. I mean, we're talking from the TSMP data, and so that would require, a huge effort, and not something that our staff is likely to undertake. And I don't think the bite's really focusing in on those areas. So it would be great to have, look at those really old listings to figure out whether or not there's still a problem, so they're not just recycled on the list every integrated report.
Yeah.
We don't do anything with them.
Yeah, I think I'm saying this out loud so that it'll be captured in the notes. But I think what a resource that might be helpful, Heather, that I just heard from you, is like an application that we can all look at. Hopefully it's open source, that shows a comparison of, like where data have been sampled, which is like that information is going to be on the swamp data dashboard, right? But also, what water bodies are listed, which ones have TMDLs, how old the data are, which ones have advisories, like being able to kind of toggle and see water bodies that are planned for or not, something like that. Does that feel like a resource that would be helpful? And I think it could be helpful, especially if we make it public and open, again, for our partners to say, oh, okay, the bioaccumulation monitoring program is going to sample these places at these dates. That's on their plan, right? But there's this gap on for OEHA or the integrated report, and we have the capacity to fill that. So let's sample this thing, and then how's that landing for folks? Would that be helpful as a project to prioritize?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be helpful to have all that information laid out, because right now, unless you're in the integrated report, program, to get all of that old data and to try to figure out, what is being done, it's really difficult. So to have it all laid out, like what was collected, how many samples were collected, when it was collected by, what agency collected it, and then kind of efforts, future efforts, what we're going to be doing with that. So we could, all the agencies could better plan on what we could do.
Any other folks have comments on that idea?
So just to clarify, Anna, and sorry, maybe I missed this because I was a little late this morning. Is the idea here to continue kind of the lean and efficient bioaccumulation program that is looking at, the same species and, random selection and panel kind of long-term trends, and doing additions onto it? Or is this more of a philosophical question of should we move away from that to filling more of a what does the public want from us in terms of a safety question?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize it. I don't know if it's a long-term shift, like having statistically robust statewide data is really important and necessary. But we're lean right now, and doing statewide robust monitoring in the way that we want to isn't feasible. So until we get the resources that we need, what do we want that to look like? And that's the question I'm posing. If folks say, no, we like the panels and we like the regulate, like that's fine. But know that we're probably going to be going from something like for lakes, 30 lakes a year to like less than 15, potentially.
Got it.
Budget.
Okay, thanks. That helps clarify.
Yeah, I think to express that another way, I think, and I feel bad saying this, but a way to express that is, I think, I've been thinking that the writing on the wall is that something that's going to be deprioritized is trend monitoring, tracking trends. And the long-term Bass Lake effort was providing trends at a couple different levels through the statewide randomization. We were getting statewide means that we could track, and then we were tracking each lake on a 10-year cycle. So yeah, but there's so many things that we want to do that, as Anna was just saying, it seems like that's something that's that's kind of included in the bare bones model. But if we want to try to do some other things and address some of the other needs, it's probably going to be sacrificed for those other things.
And I want to just underscore too that any decisions that we end up making over the next month or so, they're not going to be what the program looks like forever. Like we want to normalize having regular check-ins on our priorities, every couple of years to say, okay, we filled gaps for these 3 or 5 years. Let's get back to trends. We reserve the right to change our minds in the future, right? So I just want to normalize that and make that clear too. Yeah, Lori?
I just had some questions, maybe follow-up questions. The panel, the Bass Lakes panels, what was that project projected to sunset a certain point and have some synthesis, and where are we in that? original plan of that program?
Yeah, so we just finished panel 5 last year and are waiting, right, last year, and are waiting on, waiting on the organics data. But Jay, I mean, look at his face. He is chomping at the bit to write that big synthesis report. And so that's going to happen as soon as we get the organics data.
And actually, I want to start on it sooner because the mercury data are like a lot of the data are mercury, so that's what we've monitored most thoroughly. So, and I, in terms of our contract, I need to get going on work, so I'm going to fast track the mercury part of that synthesis. Yeah, ideally, it would be nice to have all that synthesized information to inform what we're doing now. But we're not quite in sync for that.
Okay, I was just wondering more like if we start pivoting away from that, whole process, do we still get sort of the synthesis and the data, then the trend analysis that we were hoping that was originally conceived, and so we're not, we wouldn't, we're still getting a lot of good information from that, even if we start to pivot away from it at this point.
Yes.
Sure. Well, the original concept was to just do that ad infinitum. Like we've done one round.
Okay.
Part of the trends have always been a lower priority compared to status because we've had so little information about all the different water bodies. But one of the things that the bog back then liked about that long-term plan was that the group thought that a 10-year cycle of revisiting water bodies would be a good frequency to give updated information on the water bodies. So the idea was, so we have, like, for panel 1, we did this set of 35 lakes in 2015, and the idea was that in 2025 we would revisit that panel in that set of 35 lakes, so that for each lake we could track what was going on. So trends have always been a secondary priority, but we built it into that long-term plan. Trend, not so much for trends per se, but just more the feeling is that that after 10 years the data get kind of outdated, and managers want to know what the current conditions are.
And I think just to add +1 to everything, I think what I heard during discussions and through folks' templates and things like that was we want trends, but maybe it's on more targeted water bodies where there are TMDLs or we've heard repeated concerns. So I think we're asking for something different. And, ideally, we're working hard. The swamp managers and OEMA are working hard on getting us the resources we need. I am hopeful that we will not be as lean as we are right now forever, but we can't depend on that hope. So, right, this is why we're making these hard decisions. So I think for me, it's more of how do we as a program better support the other parts of our organization that rely on our data through the integrated report and TMDLs and fish advisories. And then also, how do we better support what tribes and communities that consume fish and shellfish and other things for subsistence, like how do we support those communities as well, in addition to everything else? And having like the panel processes, that's going to tell us a lot about what's going on in our state. And I'm really looking forward to Jay's report on that. But like we need that and also other things, but we don't have the budget for both, which is, sad panda, but like that's where we're at. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. It just helps me think about it a little bit more. I think it's a lot to like process on the fly and looking at your table. And I agree, it would be nice to have a copy of the table just to be able to scroll around it and look at it and kind of help digest it all. But you know, I'm a little torn on which way to go myself at this point without having, talked more with internally. But I do know it does seem like having, there's lakes that we know maybe that aren't getting evaluated, that we would like to have evaluated. And, we have at least one lake that's in the panel in the Bass Lake study that fishing isn't even allowed there anymore. It's managed by LADWP and there's no longer fishing at that lake. So now we're spending money and resources, collecting samples at a lake that the public doesn't even have access to. That status could change potentially, but it definitely would be better to spend that money on lakes that we know public and communities are utilizing or are able to utilize. So that's, I think, one of the challenges with sort of the random sample is you don't get that. You're maybe not hitting the lakes that, disadvantaged communities or tribal communities are really eating from. And so, yeah.
And we're seeing lakes, but the same principle can be applied to rivers and streams in coastal areas. Just want to make sure everyone knows I'm thinking about those places too.
Yeah, and obviously for Region 6, we don't have coastal areas,
right?
And certainly there are lots of rivers and streams we would love to do, but the sticker shock on the cost of the rivers and streams just feels out of reach for a lot of the program.
Really gets you right in the gut, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Worth it, right? If we can get the data that we need, like we need to support folks that consume fish at those places too. But yeah, what does that look like for us? Anyone else have thoughts, ideas?
I just have a random question. So a lot of the trend stuff was really pushed in the past by EPA. Since, this is EPA funds, we haven't really had an EPA rep since Terry left. So has there been any feedback from them on shifting gears or keeping the trend stuff going?
We haven't been able to my knowledge, connect with the new EPA rep in a way that would enable that conversation. I think we're working on it and getting there. I was actually having a conversation with Ali about can we just connect and coordinate a little bit better with the whole water program and not there's a lot happening. And so that's also on our to-do list. My personal philosophy is until we receive that guidance, I'm going to listen to you all because these data support other EPA mandates like the integrated report.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, on the bioassessment side of things, it's the same situation. So, and
right, not just me.
Yeah, so it's not just you, and the bioassessment group has decided to kind of branch out to do more work in areas that have been identified as important. So similar.
I'm curious how all of these discussions are landing for OEHA and Biomonitoring California. And Jay, if you put your Bay RMP hat on, what are your thoughts on all of this? Anyone feel free to speak up.
Hey, well, I really have shellfish on the mind. I mean, just representing ACE, but other communities as well. Just I know, funding is a big challenge. I really do like Jay's idea of writing things in such a way where you could add pieces in, or how much would whole project cost, like shellfish. I don't know if you've done that before. I mean, it just seems like repeating the whole thing, but like, could you do like, this is to do shellfish statewide? This is how much it would cost, or just to prioritize communities where we know some shellfish is eating, like if you could add like pieces in, like how much that costs. I don't know how much work. It sounds like a lot of work to even do that, but is there anything that exists like that already?
Like a estimate for shellfish or?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there are some folks that are trying to bring back shellfish monitoring that I need to reach out to. But it wouldn't necessarily be like the old Muscle Watch program, for example, where it was like regular statewide super intense monitoring. But I think, we can capture that in the tiered plan approach, and acknowledging, and I think really, bold, italicized, underscore, we recommend full funding.
Yeah, right.
So we can meet the needs of California. But if you don't give us that, then this is what we'll do.
Yeah, but if you had a number, right, for like shellfish, like really to do it right, like this is how much it would be, and then
I
propose
think
some
we'd have
tiers
to,
of
I don't know that off the top of my head, and I don't see Jay or Autumn like eager to share. So I'm gonna say we don't know that right now.
We haven't scoped that out. The reason that it's been like not really, we haven't even really been able to seriously consider it is because it's a different sampling effort, and the biggest cost in any of the monitoring is the sample collection. So the Moss Landing folks, I think the expertise in that might be going away, because they did tons of work throughout the state in the 70s and 80s, and Gary did a lot of it. But are you still doing mussel work that you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So right now we're still doing stuff down at Diablo Canyon, which is based on the Muscle Watch program. But that's the only active thing.
I'm sure you could scope it out if asked, but
yeah, but we would need details that you probably can't give us at this time. Like, what are we collecting? How often are we collecting? Where are we collecting? What are we doing with it? Do you want transplants? Do you want just residents? Like, there's so many things that you'd basically have to scope out a whole project with details for us to give you a reasonable estimate, which would actually only apply for today, right? So I'm not saying that we're not willing to do that. What I'm saying is it's probably more work than just like, oh, that would cost X amount of dollars.
Okay, so yeah, I get no quick back of the envelope sort of thing, but just scoping it a little bit, and also just every once in a while when I look at advisories and I see, oh, there's a clam here, or there's a red rock crab there, and I think, oh, how did that get there? And like, what, so I just, for me, I just think I need to understand a little better how like those things appear, and just if there's any idea from like past sampling how much it would cost to put a red rock crab back in an advisory, do some more monitoring would be really helpful.
Some of the regions have over the years been like, okay, like for instance, Region 2, they wanted to collect the whole food web at San Pablo. So not only did they do plankton that we discussed earlier, but they did some crayfish there. I know that Chad has done lobsters, oysters, and mussels down in San Diego Bay. So there is stuff that happens. But it's usually on a case-by-case basis. And up to this point, we've always just provided, like, based on someone's project design, this is what it'll cost us to do the collection. And, as Jay was saying, sometimes most of the time, the most expensive thing is to get to the water body. So, in the case of San Pablo, we just decided to spend more time. That way we could do plankton tows, water grabs, crayfish traps, as well as fishing in various methods. And we got, as much as we could for them at one time. And that's the most ideal. But that also means we're spending, instead of a day at a water body, we're now spending a whole week at a water
Mm.
body to do the collections, right? So, but then you're also only, these days travel is so expensive,
Yeah.
right? So you're also only traveling up and back once, so it's hard to say. And it's why I said that we would really need to do it on a case by case basis
Right.
with more detail.
I think too, this brings up for me, like, I want to be sure we create a long-term plan that can be informative for us, but also for the regional boards and like the different RMP programs, so that it's easier for folks to identify when partnership and contribution like makes sense and aligns really well. So that, like, for the regional boards, for example, oh, we know that we're doing this group of water bodies, we want to add these things, so we're going to contribute our discretionary funds so that we don't have to pay for the permit process or the report writing or whatever, right? Like the state board funds would take care of that. Same for the Bite and Delta and Bay RMP, like understanding what we're doing so that they can say, oh, we see that there's this gap that the state board has identified, and we have extra funds or interests or whatever, so we're going to fill the gap here and coordinate a little bit better. So that's another way I'd like us to think about how to use this plan. Like, I don't want to just write a plan that is going to sit on the website and never be read again. I don't want those anymore. Like, done. So I want to make sure it's useful for everyone. So when we do get a draft, we really want folks to like review it and provide feedback, like spend the time and say, actually, in order for me to make informed decisions and understand what it would look like for me to partner with the statewide program, here's information that I need, so that we can prepare that and make it easier for folks.
I think with my RMP hat on, that's probably the main thing that the Bay RMP needs from the statewide program, is like just knowing what the plans are and figuring out how the Bay RMP can add to what's being done, like with realignment. We're in the process of figuring out how we can augment the realignment work next year with RMP resources. And then I think the other main thought that I have related to the Bay RMP is just the again, the funding, like for the just mentioning realignment, that is projected as a long-term part of the STU plan.
Mhm.
So that's going to continue to take a good chunk of the budget. So leaving it's important work. So that's a good part of the plan, but it leaves less for all the other things that we want to do. And just the Bay RMP, what we're doing in the Bay RMP just underscores the budget needs. We're gonna be spending for our, we sample once every 5 years, and we're gonna be spending about 600,000 for the Bay this year. And that's more than the statewide budget, the annual statewide budget. It seems like we could use about 10 times more funding for all the things we want to do at the state level, as an order of magnitude estimate.
And I think, so just put a finer point on that, we can use 10 times more funding to achieve the objectives that were originally set out for our program. It's not like to do special bells and whistle
Right.
things. It's like to do the essentials.
We could make really good use of that level of funding. Yeah. And including things like doing consumption survey work.
Yeah. For the state. Mhm.
Yeah.
I was just a thought on the cost for shellfish collection being going out to the site. I think it would be good to write in a section on how we could coordinate with CDPH and CDFW for some of the routine shellfish biotoxin monitoring and being able to add on pollutants to that.
Yeah. That's a great add. Thanks, Chad. Anyone else have thoughts?
We prompted OEI, and we haven't heard from them yet.
Hi. I think it's a great synthesis. It's really interesting to see everybody's priorities laid out in this way. I also would like to see it, you know, and in some format where we can study it a little bit more. I do have a comment. We're able to, on our side, give feedback based on data that exists. You know, we've been giving you our data gaps for your panels for several years. And when we did our high contaminant water body analysis, it's based on data that are existing. I'm curious if we have any water bodies out there that are kind of falling through the gaps, maybe. If there are water bodies perhaps that are listed, you know, have TMDLs for mercury that haven't been sampled, that we have no data for, that also might be popular fishing spots. We wouldn't necessarily know that because we only are accessing data or analyzing data that we have.
Right.
Yeah. So is anybody looking at that just to see if there's anything that's falling through the gaps on that side?
I can't think of I know in my heart from what I've heard from the regions that we do know there are water bodies that are falling through the cracks. Whether or not there's like a consistent method to assess what those are, I don't know that off the top of my head. But again, I don't like to speak for the region. So if someone's like, actually, I wrote a report last year that has all the things you're asking for, please let us know. But that, you know, that can be something that we add as a need for like a data project for the program.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. You know, it would be a shame if there's a water body that people are fishing at heavily and it's really high, it has a TMDL, and there's no data or advisory for it. So,
and I think that's linked to everyone wanting information on consumption and needing consumption surveys to really inform that like assessment.
agreed. Yeah, that seems like it should be a high priority.
Yeah. And just so if I could add, like specifically in Region 2, I think that our efforts have largely been focused on like the locations where we have mercury TMDLs, you know, and those are the sites that we generally have the most data from, specifically in the Guadalupe River watershed and then Walker Creek and Tomales Bay. But when we start and we currently have 25 mercury impaired lakes and reservoirs, and only 5 of them have TMDLs. So of those other 20, half of those, the data is a little outdated. And I'm talking like, you know, maybe 10, 15 years old. And so that's why we're working to actually work to get updated data sets. And so this summer, you know, we're working with Moss Landing to actually go sample 3 new reservoirs and lakes that we don't have data from. So, but some do slip through the cracks, you know, and that's just with me being here for almost, you know, 18 months. I'm seeing that some of the data is not there for some of these lakes and reservoirs.
So we need to capture everything that's in Gerardo's brain and the equivalent at each of the regional water boards and make it more transparent. I think that's what I'm hearing, because like there's no way I would be able to remember that.
Yeah, and then in addition, we have some WSPers that are interning at our office, and what we have them doing is we started kind of going to sending them to some of these lakes and reservoirs to try to see fishing intensity, because we don't know. You know, there's some that we don't have any data on. Whether we know that there's some that are like no contact, but then the ones that do have fishing, we don't know if people are fishing. So that's where those consumption surveys are actually really useful.
And I think too, for me, with the consumption survey idea, I don't want to limit it to areas that are only legal according to regulations, because we know that that doesn't always align with people's lived experience, but we still need to help protect those people. I don't know how we do that, but I know it's a need, and it's something that I don't want us to ignore when we think about statewide consumption surveys. And again, that would require close partnership with, you know, Fish and Wildlife and other partners to really do that well. Yeah, Autumn?
I just wanted to say that I think in the past, the program has done a really good job at soliciting specific requests from the regions for every year to have as a backup. And I hope that whatever we do in the future, we continue to be able to do that and be able to, you know, shift in real time. I think that's personally, I think that's really been a value. And it's a great way to incorporate all the things that we're talking about here. So I don't want to lose that.
Oh yeah, 1000%. That's not going away. And in fact, I want to make that process a little bit easier to contribute for folks not in the regional boards. So for our tribal partners, for example, I want them to be, I think, well aware of when they should expect things and how to add things in so that we can get a broader lens for those needs on an annual basis as well. So standardizing what that process looks like, you know, making it simple. We're not losing that. That's not going nowhere. I think I saw Lori unmuted a little while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, you know, it seems like a lot of the regions want more data on where fishing is occurring and how much and what intensity and what species. Is that something that could be tackled at a statewide like level? Is that on the radar too, to try and help, I don't know, develop some sort of survey or something like that that we all could then use? Or
Yeah, it's definitely on our radar, but like I said before, there's a number of regions that are doing on a region specific level right now. And so I'm interested to see how all of those studies turn out and then come together as a collective to share what we're learning and then like make a plan together. So I think that is definitely like I mentioned, like the data projects of developing resources to help make our planning easier. But I think the consumption survey is something that's definitely on our radar. We won't be able to start tackling it next year, for example, but I want us to start like getting our duckies ready so that we can make a plan for it sooner rather than later. But I don't want to just start without hearing what our regional board partners are learning, because they're doing really great work that I don't want to be just, you know, applied to that region. I want us to learn from each other.
sounds good.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm not going to make you stare at me for another hour if you don't want to. So an action item for me that I'm saying out loud so that I captured in the notes is to make this sheet accessible to folks. I don't know what that'll look like yet, but it'll go out with the notes. I will note that I'm meeting with my management. Let me pull up my calendar to talk about this on April 8th. So it's not like this is something that we're going to be sending out and asking for feedback. Like, I don't want folks to dedicate that time because you already gave me the feedback. So if there are small revisions that you think should be made before that time, then we can accommodate that. But I'm not asking for folks to say, well, your results are wrong. Like, I'm not going to use that type of feedback. So just to be really clear on that. But I think it's helpful, like long-term, for folks to be able to see what we're seeing.
Can we talk
Anna, do you have
about
a sense of like maybe a straw man or some kind of draft idea of what you want to bring to the management?
I'm
Out of all
gonna
the,
bring this and this conversation to them.
and then have them sort of, I mean, there's a lot of tough choices on locations and
Yep.
species and contaminants and all these things that we talked about, consumption survey.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to summarize, walk them through the spreadsheet, just like I've done with you, and summarize the conversation that we've had here in terms of like elevating project ideas and priorities and things like that. And have them be explicit about their recommendations for 2025 for sure, and 2026. But then, think about the long-term priorities if they have, anything from their lens that is sticking out. For example, asking them, do you want to keep with the panel structure? Should we create panels for rivers and the coast? Or should we pivot to filling gaps according to requests? Like those sorts of questions are what they'll make the final call on.
So I think you've been pretty clear about this. This is the chance for this group to say, I really want this, or I really want that. And you suggested a couple of priorities being the OER gaps and the integrated report gaps, which are reasonable things, but
like old TMDL data, that sort of thing.
Yeah. But I guess I'm just prompting the group one more time. This is your chance to say, we think we really need this or that. Out of all these things we've talked about.
Hello again. Can we go to the PFAS section of this document?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about too. So
okay, great. We'll tag team it. Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you. I mean, we're in that 64%. I was expected to be higher, but it's up there. And can I do a double vote for PFAS? Seems like the writing's on the wall, but I guess nothing, there's no foregone conclusions, but this is kind of, it's elevated, right? Like there's a lot of attention, a lot of concern, and hopefully there will be more monitoring. Is that necessarily going to translate into that? I don't know.
For the PFAS conversation, it's really a discussion about, do we want our program to be reactive, meaning wait for the thresholds to already be developed, or lawsuits or whatever it's going to take for people to really get the fire under them? Or do we want to be, proactive and be part of, generating the data needed to inform those decisions at the regulatory, in the regulatory space? And so that's the question that I'll be bringing to my management. And I think for metals, it's really, about filling gaps. And, if the data are old, analyze for metals again. If we haven't monitored there, analyze for metals, they're still really important. For PFAS, I think PFAS are the metals of 20 years ago, right? We're we don't know enough to know what we don't know. And so maybe it's worth integrating that into regular monitoring for a little while so that we can get a better picture, and also generate data that our partners need to make, decisions on fish advisories, integrated report, all of the other things. Yeah, Jay?
I think Autumn wanted to say something, but I just wanted to get in line.
Okay, I did. I just wanted to say so with regard to PFAS specifically, we've got that archive request out for right now. I've had quite a few people ask me, and Anna, I know you have too, like, why should I spend money on this now when I don't have a threshold? And this gets to what you were speaking, but it sounded to me like from at least one of the conversations that people are having trouble with their managers because they don't want to spend money on something that doesn't have a threshold, but there can't be a threshold unless they have data. And I think we talked about this just recently. Right now, most of the data are in San Francisco Bay and San Diego Bay. So I know that this group is interested in this, but I just want to reiterate, you know, we have the opportunity to help inform this and then provide thresholds that a WEHA can, or data for a WEHA to generate their thresholds. I also wanted to talk about the algal toxins, but Jay, if your comment is about PFAS, then we can go to you first.
I have a PFAS comment and then another one.
Let's start with PFAS.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that PFAS isn't the same as mercury 20 years ago, because 20 years ago we still had thresholds that we could compare to. And the level of for mercury, we're way above thresholds. We're way into the no consumption zone in a lot of water bodies across the state. PFAS, we don't quite have thresholds yet, but we think maybe we'll be in a maybe not quite as bad as mercury relative to thresholds, but maybe we'll be in a significant concern zone for PFAS as well. But we also, in San Francisco Bay, we've got the best data set. The levels are not screamingly high, or not even relatively high compared to other places in the country where they've got industrial PFAS contamination. We've got some, and the levels that we see are above sort of the lower higher consumption rate thresholds, not no consumption thresholds, but the lesser higher consumption rate thresholds, if you understand what I mean. So what I think would be appropriate would be maybe not going all in on PFAS, all samples everywhere, but doing some pilot work just to kind of scope things out. And OEHA doesn't need more field data to establish their thresholds. That they review the tox data to do that. So we won't really generating more data. I don't think will really help the OEHA process of developing their ATLs. But I'll throw in my other general comment, and that is, I think maybe we need more iteration. It relates to that PFAS comment too. Maybe your management does say, okay, we need something on PFAS, but then, what exactly would we do on PFAS if it's not really, if it's more of a pilot versus just doing it everywhere? We could provide input on that. So I think it'd be good to have this meeting with management and see what comes out of that. But that's when you may, when they sort of say, we want this, this, and this, then maybe this group will have something to react to and say, well, actually, I really wanted this in the mix. And so
I'm 98% certain that no matter what I say in April, that reaction will occur.
Yeah.
We're never going to be able to meet everyone's needs all at the same time.
Will it be a done deal after that management meeting, or could there be another? Could there be an iteration where this group could react to what management says?
I don't want us to iterate till the end of days. I want us to make a plan for now. And this is why I've heard loud and clear from management. We don't want to make 10-year plans anymore. We need to revisit every couple of years. It's a lot of work. It's a pain in the butt. but our needs change every couple of years. So do our contract timelines, you know, we've got triennial review processes, things like that. And so I think we will solicit feedback on the draft long-term plan. So there might be some adjustment in, well, this should go in this tier of funding or things like that. But the core priorities of how we're going to shift the program for the next 5 years, management's going to make that decision unless they say, okay, this is what we think for now, I'll give feedback. If they don't ask for that, then I'm not going to solicit that, because we can go round and round for decades and it wouldn't help us at all. And it would actually delay our permitting timelines and things like that. So this is why I've asked for people to give feedback. So we're using that as the base, and that will be the strongest way to inform management. So some feedback on the long-term plan, but priorities will have already been set.
Right. So again, the time is now to speak up.
Autumn, you had a thought on
Toxins, algal toxins. So I have heard many times over that this is something that people are interested in. I have logistic concerns about it in fish for methods that are here at the moment. I don't know if it's the same for shellfish, bivalves and crustaceans, but I know that with fish, it's like analysis within 24 hours. And so logistically, right now, with the methods at hand, I don't see how that is. Now I need somebody smarter than me to come up with, like, if there are other methods out there. I just haven't been able to find any. So I
think my view on cyanotoxins, algal toxins is similar to microplastics in the sense that the needs are there, the methods are not yet. In the sense of us being able to implement robust statewide monitoring in a way that's cost effective. But that doesn't mean we say, okay, we don't think about cyanotoxins or microplastics, right?
agree.
Like, thinking from a proactive lens, how do we prepare ourselves? Like, how do we use the next 5 years to prepare ourselves for when the methods are caught up with us? I don't anticipate management saying, we don't care anything about fish. We just want cyanotoxins on all the things. Like, they're not gonna go crazy like that. So if it helps ease your concerns there, but I think
I just wanted to put it out for the group. I don't necessarily feel like I don't know how expensive microplastics analyses are. Jay, you might be able to answer that, but I feel like that is a little more attainable at present than the toxins, and I might have a skewed view of that. Just
it's attainable from a logistical perspective, in the sense that, like, the microplastics will stay in the tissue,
right?
But I attended the council's like microplastics meeting last December in Scorp, and the focus is on like water quality, tissue thresholds, and methods and things like that are being developed, but they're not cheap right now.
Right.
Yeah, Lauren, I saw your note in the chat. OEHA consumption surveys. Yeah, so it's not going to be included in the calculation, because that section is just for the water boards. But yes, we have a note that OEHA also echoes the need.
I see how it is, Anna. I see where we rank now. Thanks for marking it anyways.
I would like to also upvote that, even though I know it doesn't count.
It counts. It's just not quantified.
Okay.
And then Lori, I saw your note about R6 and PFAS. I tried to scroll like.
Yeah, I saw it. Thanks. We did check that box. I was looking at the boxes we had checked for Region 6 and thinking maybe we should have checked the PCBs box as well. So perhaps you can add us there for PCBs. When Lauren sent us OEHA's sort of list of priorities for our region, there were, several PCB lakes on that higher priority list, and which was very helpful for us, and especially for me coming in kind of newer to the program and not having a lot of the history. OEHA had fish tissue data that we didn't realize that they had, and so it was really good check-in for us to help us kind of prioritize our lakes. Anyway, so thanks. Yeah, please add the PCB for us too. So
John,
thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a comment from what I've heard from OEHA over the years, and that PCBs are, they like to get PCB data because that's after mercury, the second biggest risk driver. So when there's a water body where there are no data, they like to get the PCBs along with mercury so that they can issue advice. So Lauren, correct me if needed, but even though it may kind of shows up as a lower ranking here, if folks want advisories, then you kind of need PCB data.
It's nice to have PCB data in at least one species that typically accumulates it. Yeah, if we have catfish or carp, caught, it would be nice to have PCBs sort of as a sentinel for that water body. Yeah.
Are there other toxins here that you'd like me to put an X next to for OEHA?
Yeah, I mean metals.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think it looks good.
Yeah, that's consistent with all the input we've gotten from OEHA over the years.
Anna, when you send this out, share it on the website. Could we maybe send back with upvotes for categories that people have already mentioned in their survey? I think it was kind of open-ended, so we just picked the most that popped up in our head at that time, but we didn't see that PCBs were a category that we could have voted for, so just something like that.
Yeah. Let me think about what that would look like. My concern is if we open it up again, then everyone's gonna upvote all the things and then we won't have any useful information. So like this, this was what people prioritize when they had time to think about priorities. And I don't want to modify that too much, because then we're also getting into like, what's it called? It's like survey bias, right? Where everyone wants the same thing because everyone else said they wanted the same thing. I'll think about how we can solicit updates and feedback on this, but again, it will be a tight turnaround because I have the meeting on April 8th. So it might be like 72 hours or something like that, right? Which I know people don't like, and you can be mad at me, but I can live with that.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. And again, like this is the conversation for the long-term plan. We're not getting rid of the annual feedback process for every time we have a plan for water bodies. So it's not like this is going to be the final word for everyone for all of time. this is just going to help us think long term. And then every year people can say, oh, we also want to add this water body and we need to do dioxins at this one place, even though it's super low priority in the long term, right? So I just want to clarify that as well. Like feedback will be a regular thing. Yeah, Autumn. Oh, you're muted.
Earlier, Jay, you mentioned that for OEHA to develop the advisory levels, they needed toxicity data. It's not necessarily a long-term thing, but is it appropriate for this group to help fund some of that toxicity study? Or are those already being done and we're just not there yet? OEHA, you probably.
Yeah, I want OEHA to answer that, not Jay.
Right.
No offense, Jay.
Yeah, that's a Wes question. I'm sorry, I can't address that one.
Okay.
This has come up in the RMP in the past, and we've done a tiny bit of tox work, but in general, it's expensive and sort of we rely on the broad community to do all the different tox studies that are needed. It's, you know, it's usually a weight of evidence and not just one study.
Right.
So I think that's, you know, in general, that's what OEHA does as well. They review all the available information that's out there and then come up with their thresholds.
And I think, you know, a concern that I have on not considering or putting the program in a position to be proactive with PFAS is that the information that OEHA is going to take in will be skewed towards San Francisco and San Diego Bay. Love those places. Great sources of data. They don't reflect all of Californians. And so I think I'd like us to think about, and I'm going to propose this to my management, think about the extent to which we want to provide more statistically robust data on PFAS throughout the state at different water bodies and species and things like that. Like if that's a priority for us now. And again, that will be a decision that's made later.
I did like Jay's idea of sort of maybe a pilot program to look at PFAS throughout the state to get a better understanding of where our issues might occur.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, down the line, it will be important for us to have these data.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Hopefully the archives will help start that off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Can I ask a question about the archives?
Yep.
Is there any hope of statewide funding to analyze the archives for PFAS?
Yeah. So we're looking at the requests that the regional boards or things that the regional boards are committing to or they want to tackle. And then we're looking at our budget and our contracts and seeing which gaps that we can fill. And also, I think taking the lead on paying for like Autumn's time or Moss Landing's time to prepare the samples and things like that. So hopefully all the regional boards are paying for is the analysis of the chemistry, and we'd like to cover everything else. But yeah, that's another thing that we're weighing in our budgets right now.
Okay, but the cost of the analysis would still likely fall on the regions for the
samples that the regions are saying we want to pay for these. We're working on like looking at the archives and developing a prioritized list of when we have extra funds and we want to analyze some archives. These are the ones that we're going to do first. We don't want to say, like, for example, Region 9 is doing a lot of them. I don't want to put in our budget plan, okay, we're going to do all of the Region 9 samples, because then it's like not good use of our coordination and money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Heather?
Yeah, I think we had a couple of thoughts on the PFAS that number one is that I know that our stakeholders are really concerned about PFAS, but we would get a lot of questions about the, quality assurance. And if there's not something specific that was directed towards the PFAS, I know that when some agencies went out to sample, they looked at the contamination from their sampling equipment, all this stuff like that. And I know that you have really strong quality assurance, for the other chemicals, but this is sort of like the CECs, not wearing deodorant or perfume and all that stuff. So I think that one issue would make us feel a little bit more assured, because we are going to get questions if there's anything in the fish tissue. That's going to be the first question that somebody's going to bring up.
Yeah, I kind of want that to Autumn, but I also want to note that this is why we pay Moss Landing the monies, because they are professionals and experts, and that's something that they're thinking about more and more is when they go out in the field using the right equipment and wearing the right clothes and doing the right things so that we have high quality samples. So if you're I'm not worried about that from a quality assurance perspective. And
it's just
actually I'm gonna hold on a second.
Okay.
Moss Landing gave a training to tribes about their methods for collection and things like that. And I'm gonna add a link. There's a link in the slides about that training series that's actually now posted. And we had a conversation about that. So that's something that we've been thinking about. And from collection to archive, Moss Landing is considering PFAS and which samples we use for archives and things like that. Autumn, is there
okay,
anything you wanna add?
that would be great, because I didn't see it in the specific QAPP. So that was my concern.
Yeah.
Because I know that our stakeholders would totally ask about that. That would be one of the first things they would ask about.
That's actually a good point, Heather. I know that we're going to be updating that QAPP on a regular basis, and that's definitely something that we can add in. That is, I think the part that they're missing there is the QAPP references our internal SOPs, and it's covered in those. And so maybe that's the part that's not explicitly stated because it's already covered in our standard operating procedures. But yeah, we are very aware that the activities that we do in the field and in the lab can contaminate for that. Personally, I'm more concerned about the lab side than the field side, because we use the fillet or the meat of the fish and not the, we're not looking at the external portions, and then anything that is potentially exposed, we exclude from the sample. So, yeah, I think it is covered to allay your fears by our SOPs, but just maybe not explicitly stated in the quote.
Yeah,
we're updating that next year, so we can add it, make it more explicit.
And then the other question was just about different fish. So from the brief readings, from the East Coast, certain fish species were more likely to have PFAS. And so we were wondering, as a priority for the OEHA, I mean, was there a priority for the OEHA in looking at different fish? Or, from the selection of the archive samples, would it be better to look at multiple species from one lake or the same species from multiple lakes? And so that was kind of we didn't really have enough information. And so that's why we weren't specifying what we were interested in, because we just didn't feel like we had enough information on where they might be found, or if they're all in the fillets, or if they're in the heads, or, where do the PFAS accumulate? So I think from us just having more information and knowledge to be able to determine those kind of answers.
Cool. Thanks, Heather. We have time for one more question or comment, but the agenda said we're ending at 11:20, and I'd like to respect everyone's time on that. And there's a couple things I want to go over before we close. Final thoughts? This has been a great discussion, and it's going to be really helpful. So thank you.
we have our resident toxicologist back on the line. If we do have any additional PFAS questions in terms of developing the ATL and the process there, he can address those now.
Right, we can do lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
Happy to throw you under the bus, Wes.
I think we lost Jay, but does anyone want to recap the question for Wes in terms of the, I think the idea was what data are needed by OEHA to develop ATLs / what's the point of us collecting PFAS data if it's not going to be used for that?
It will definitely be used. It gives us more information on relevant exposure to different types of species, some of the environmental fate and transport through the system. It also helps us think about PFAS as a class, because there are a lot of chemicals, as everyone knows, and they behave very differently both in the environment and within the human body as far as adverse effects on humans go.
Perfect.
So that I am 100% confident we will at least have an ATL for PFAS and likely PFOA to begin with, and then start marching forward.
Cool. Thanks. You joined right in time for us to put you on the spot.
It's just to get thrown under the bus.
Thanks for flagging that, Lauren. All right. I'm going to skip a couple of slides. All right. So as we wrap, reminder that the April 17th meeting has been canceled. If you registered, you should have received a cancellation, and now the link is no longer. So hopefully there's no confusion there. We will be meeting on April 24th. I'll be reporting back on the conversation I have with Swamp Management on their long-term priorities, and that will set the stage for developing the long-term plan. We'll also do our regular STU updates and talk about monitoring for the coast and all the things that are also happening in addition to this conversation. Same in July and October. At some point, Jay and I will have a draft long-term monitoring plan, and we'll send that out to the work group and solicit feedback on that. My hope is that we will be able to review that feedback and finalize the long-term plan in October so that we can finalize the plan for 2025 much sooner than that, if not shortly thereafter. Okay, so I'm going to do all the things with Jay. If you haven't registered for the meetings for the rest of this year, we're back on the quarterly schedule. I know y'all are going to miss me so much every month, but I'll see you every 3 months. And as soon as I'm going to start processing this recording as soon as we sign off. So there will be a recording announcement when that's available, probably tomorrow morning, if not this afternoon. And then when the notes and things are ready, that will be shared as well, in addition to some version of the spreadsheet that I shared for people that take a peek. So I mentioned earlier, and just wanted to flag for folks, we started a tribally centered training series on bioaccumulation monitoring as a way to kind of share how we do what we do as a statewide program with our tribal partners that are interested in expanding their own government's monitoring programs. We've had 3 trainings thus far listed on the slide, and the slides and recordings from those are posted on the training series webpage. So that's open to everyone if folks are curious about certain components of the training. And I've been able to get those up like within a couple of days of the training. So if you're bummed that you won't be able to attend the September 17th meeting because you aren't part of a tribal government, worry not. You can check out the recording like 2 days later. And there's going to be a couple of more trainings in October to December, but those haven't been scheduled yet. So I'll keep you updated when we schedule those. And that's it. Again, this has been a super helpful, juicy discussion, and I really appreciate y'all, jumping on when you can and contributing in ways that you can and sharing your thoughts with us. It'll be really helpful for the future of our program. So thanks.
Anna, thank you for facilitating all of this. You've done a great job.
Nice work.
Agreed. Thanks, Anna.
Have a good afternoon, y'all.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, Anna. You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.